The 16th Jeju Forum 2021 marks the last day of this year, and I would like to thank you for attending this precious event. I am your MC today, Oh Ji-won. Nice to meet you.
Taking the time to be here with us today. 네, 그럼 본격적으로 세션을 시작.
The session will be kicked off in full swing, and I would like to introduce the moderator for today's session, Mr. Lee Jong-seo, who is the senior fellow at the Sejong Institute, and he's a professor at Yonsei University. He's also a former minister for unification, and he has the expertise in the intra-Korean relations. Mr. Lee Jong-suk, the floor is yours. Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you. I feel so wonderful to have this meeting. And from now on, let's invite the keynote speaker, Mr. Kim Bo-yeon. And after the keynote speech, then we will invite the presenters of today. Mr. Kim, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, I am Kim Bo-hyun, Chairman of the Institute for National Security Strategy. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Moon Jung-in, Chairman of Sejong Institute, Dr. Robert Collin, and Mr. Kim Ki-jung, President of INSS, as well as all the staff members who organized this session. I was born and raised here in Jeju, International Peace City. After 17 years, I retired from public life in Jeju. I am honored to deliver keynote speech to you. In the interest of time, I'd like to briefly touch on the topic of the session, basically the overview of the 8th Party Congress of Korean Workers' Party. As you understand, the Party Congress is the highest decision-making organization. The 8th Congress, since asserted its pursuit of socialism and established a policy direction for the next 5 years. During the 8th Congress, Kim Jong-un showed a bit different attitude than before. First of all, looking back on the past 5 years, he said their economic development strategy fell short of its targets in almost every segment. This acknowledgement broke the previous image of absolute leader, which indicated tough circumstances North Korea is facing at the moment. On the other hand, the fact that he acknowledged the failure means that he is courageous to make progress based on the current circumstances. Future strategy-wise, he, for the first time, shared a big picture. So the party mentioned that they will advance DPRK's socialism construction for the next 5 years and continue its fight for the next level in 15 years to evolve into a socialist powerhouse. Such statements imply that he takes the 8th Congress as an opportunity to break through the current crisis. as well as strong ambition for the future. And also, we can summarize his report in 3 segments. First, political-wise, Kim Jong-un has 10-year experience as a leader now. Based on such confidence, he tries to step out of the shadow of his predecessors. And finally, by becoming the party's general secretary, he realigned the organizational system and differentiated its propaganda from its predecessors. Ruminating the 주체 politics and military-first politics, he introduced a new concept, which is people-first politics. And also, military-first politics was excluded from the party rule. Instead, people-first politics was included and highlighted the importance of serving its people. He also mentioned arduous march in order to appeal to the people and to control the ruling elite. And I think the special order is in the same line. He also reinforced its ruling system, which means break away from Kim Jong-il's military system. This might be for Kim Jong-un as a third-generation leader, this might be an inevitable challenge. So for him, the strong military and old officials who have accumulated power for quite a long time must have been tough to deal with. So seemingly, the restoration of the party's power was the fastest way for him to have control over the military. Next, for economy and military. I believe 2 presenters will elaborate on these topics, so allow me to skip on these. However, he emphasized the building economy based on self-reliance and categorized each different economic segment. And also because of the no deal from Hanoi summit, I believe he stressed the importance of nuclear program and the modernization of their defense power. Lastly, regarding diplomacy, for DPRK-US relations and also for inter-Korean relations, they put a couple of preconditions. This was also, I believe, the result of the no deal from Hanoi summit. As they were let down by Hanoi summit, I think they became more aggressive. Although the Biden administration has continued to send favorable diplomacy signals, and also Moon administration in South Korea continues to show its willingness to resume dialogue, still North Korea is postponing their response. So in summary, the strategic initiative of North Korea is to normalize its control power and also build its economy for the sake of the livelihood of people. At the same time, under the condition of first move to be made by counterparty, they will continue their diplomacy in the region. Let me share my short-term outlook in 2 segments. First, economy, and second, their relations with neighboring countries. So their policy is all about setting goal, but the possibility of implementation of such policy is based on circumstances. However, they are in the middle of quite difficult situation. To put their expression here, we are faced with severe challenge, and it is serious, more serious than ever. Because of the prolonged sanctions, they are struggling with foreign currency shortage, and they lost their economic driving force, and also they are experiencing severe impact from the pandemic and the natural disasters and anti-socialism sentiment in their society. In particular, when it comes to the pandemic, the media has covered the international news always. I first read a Nodong newspaper, which is their official news media, 15 years ago, and this newspaper has covered this pandemic news every day. I believe this is unprecedented event for North Korea. On a daily basis, they provide numerical update on the number of victims from the pandemic and also share how the government is trying to deal with the pandemic. However, there has been any report on the decrease of the number of victims, and they never expressed how they plan to deal with the situation from the level of the government. So I doubt that their bold economic plan will be successful in the short term. It's unlikely for them to achieve such goal to even if they put all the focus on the economic development, but now they are trying to expand their defense power as well. And also, they are sending this message that until the responsibility on the people is not met, these people do not have any right to die. I mean, this kind of message has been provided to the public all the way. Also regarding the inter-Korean relations and US-DPRK relations, there's no sign of short-term recovery. So from their diplomacy principle, it is quite ambiguous with the translation of definition of their principle, and also it's unilateral. So for the time being, I'm afraid North Korea will maintain its position toward South Korea and the US like it is today. North Korea needs to come back to the table of dialogue as confirmed in the process of US DPRK dialogue process, because it is the only way for them to recover their technology as well as peace. For the first time since President Biden took the office, Kim Jong-un mentioned the need for preparation for the potential dialogue with other nations. At the same time, he highlighted the need of a stable management of the geopolitical situation on the peninsula. I think he adopted somewhat external expression on the peninsula because he has opened the room for further dialogue. So the party congress this year reinforced his base as a single leader for the nation. And I believe we need to have more in-depth and new kinds of research, especially on his behaviors. And we need to take a close look at the changes in the geopolitical situation around the peninsula. The tension between U.S. China gets ever more intense, and also the North Korea and China are likely to have closer relations. So we need to make proper management on the condition over potential tension on the peninsula. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your insightful presentation from Mr. Kim Bo-hyun. From his keynote speech is finished now, and from now on, let's get into the panel discussion in full swing. We are given about 53 minutes left, so we need to try to get punctual. So I would like to introduce the panels. Here, Dr. Jo Dong-ho will take the seat. Let's invite Mr. Jo Sung-ho, the professor at Ewha Women's University. Professor Lee Jung-chul from Seoul National University. Mr. Lee Ki-dong from the Institute for National Security Strategy, and Dr. Lee Itae-yoon. So there will be 3 presentations and 1 panel for discussion today. So in particular, Mr. Kim of the INSS, he requested a brief presentation to be punctual, and he requested for me to ask questions to a type of test them. And I'm really humbled because they're the top level experts. However, I want to highlight that we need to be really punctual. So per presenter, only 5 minutes will be given. So just go briefly. And Dr. Lee, please make an insightful discussion, and later I will ask you a series of questions for Q&A session. Okay? And due to the constraints in time, let's start by Mr. Jo Dong-ho.
네, 조동호입니다.
Hello, I am Jo Dong-ho. I'd like to share my thoughts on the economic development in North Korea. With the 8th Party Congress, I'd like to share my thoughts on their economy. I think they reached the tipping point now because of political factors and also regarding the content of the Party Congress. First, regarding its political landscape, there has been many changes. Kim Jong-il, the father of Kim Jong-un, put more focus on military sectors. and also there was the adoption of the term competition. I think this is the first time that North Korea tried to develop economy as well as nuclear power. In 2018, in April, North Korea started to put an emphasis on economy. So it's more like only economy. Again, after the eighth party, they are back to the competition, which is competition 2.0. But this has a little bit difference from the competition 1.0 because they pursue both nuclear program as well as the economy. But however, after the 8th Congress, they try to adopt new concepts like nuclear submarine or more advanced concepts of nuclear program. So this brand new competition is all about self-economy, self-reliance, more defensive mode. So in conclusion, in the Kim Jong-un regime, they continue to highlight the importance of economy, but now they are going back to the competition between two different sectors again. I believe their economic model has reached its limitation. The definition of economic growth could be quite complicated, but in short, outcome has to increase in growth. Whether it's capitalism or socialism, in order to increase output, we should increase input or upgrade efficiency. There is no way other than these two options. However, North Korea was not able to increase its input. That's why over the course, they tried to expand its productivity as well as efficiency. Under the socialism, they put more managers to control its laborers and tried to utilize markets in order to increase the efficiency of the economy. But then in 2017, as they started to highlight the importance of economic development and also with the pandemic, they are now in a very difficult situation. So the only option for North Korea is to increase input, but it's not possible for them because of the sanctions. So in order to expand input, we could increase capital or labor, but only card they can play at the moment is to increase labor. They have to highlight speed and hard work of its laborers because they simply have no other option. I'm not sure how long they could maintain such system in order for their economic program. I think other presenters will share their ideas. Thank you. I believe you have many experiences as moderator. Thank you for being punctual. So we're going to ask questions later on. So let me hand it over to Professor Lee.
Regarding the Party Congress of North Korea, we thought about diplomacy toward the U.S. and they said the power to power. The the terms of power to power and the goodwill to goodwill was quite related to the concept of balancing. And goodwill to goodwill refers to they will try to understand the intention of the counterpart. So without longer term viewpoints, the terms like these from North Korea, it's really hard to understand the meaning of the terms. So the external foreign policies of North Korea is put an emphasis on the self-reliance or independence and peace. In Korea, we use self-reliance. However, in North Korea, they like to use independence. So different English terms are used in both Koreas. So when they talk about independence, it means it is not connected to isolationism because they are putting an emphasis on the autonomy and the right to make their own choices. So the concepts are slightly different, and the concept of independence from North Korea has a long history from the 1970s. So they try to make sufficient production domestically, and sometimes they made a slogan of opening up the market. So they kind of zigzagged from the two different fronts. And about a few years ago, the leader of North Korea said the imperialism will collapse. And in order not to, in order to prevent imperialism from collapsing, we have to cooperate with the countries in the third world. That's that that's the independent diplomacy that was told in North Korea back in 1980s. And when the North is confronting with the US, North Koreans said they are the outpost in the East in terms of the socialism. They said the outpost. We need to focus on the term. So, outpost of tyranny used by the U.S. And they said North Korea said Eastern outpost. So in that case, they are truly against the U.S. and the term of the independent diplomacy is from the viewpoint of anti-U.S. So from this viewpoint, the political situation, the times, and the international checks and balances, all these factors are considered to maintain the independence. Is it an isolation or is it an anti-U.S. sentiment or are do they want opening up the market? So it's really hard to interpret the current meaning of independence because they sometimes use the term different way. So what is Kim Jong-un's version of independent diplomacy? It's quite hard to understand in depth because he has more than 50 nuclear ballistic missiles and it's a nuclear power right now, and under the circumstances he's kind of suppressing North Korea, and some say that he just turned his attitude toward South into a revisionism, and by doing so he's trying to get the upper hand in intra-Korea relations. That's my question about the North Korean policies as of now. And from the other angle, North Korea is struggling for get recognition in the international stage. Therefore, Kim Jong-un's extreme acts of exploding the office, liaison office, and violent verbal violences, and we are trying to interpret those actions and behaviors of Kim Jong-un. And the strong power to power, the goodwill to goodwill must be interpreted in the detailed context. Thank you for your insightful presentation. As you know, the presenters are the experts, and there are some differences and gaps and separated contexts of the experts. So please understand because the subtopics are quite different from each other. However, think about the bigger picture of the 8th Congress. We can deepen our understanding on North Korean situation. Let's invite the next speaker. Good afternoon. I am Lee Gi-dong, and I will make a presentation on the North Korean military services. And I would like to tell you about the current status and the role of the North Korean military due to the 8th Congress. After the inauguration of Kim Jong-un, it has been a dilemma, and people thought the U.S. North Korean military is a factor for threat because his father Kim Jong-il died suddenly, and at the initial stage of his regime, he struggled to get the real power by suppressing the North Korean military. And first, he just tightened his control over the North Korean military, and the core power of the North Korean military were just delegated to the choice of the Congress. At that, there were three categories of the method of control. First is economic control. So we can know from the purging of the previous powers of North Korea, the external projects were moved toward the internal side, and human resources control were taken place by purging the top level officials of North Korea, and they just made a transit to the next generation to tighten the control over the cabinet. And the other thing is that there is a institution within the North Korean military, and Kim Jong Un gave a bigger power to that institution so that they can have a control over the entire North Korean military. So Kim Jong Un tried to have a bigger influence over the North Korean army. And after the 8th Congress of the party, they are still maintaining their attitude over the control on North Korean military. And the other thing is that the party would like to institutionalize North Korean army. During the 8th Congress, the three types of controlling methods were tried. Firstly, economic control. The special units and tightened struggle were ordered from Kim Jong-un. The core institution was the military. So the upper parts of management of the military were given the bigger power so that they can have a tight control over the entire army. And regarding the second control on the human resources, the number of the core members of North Korean army were decreased by Kim Jong-un, and the number of the representatives were decreased by half compared to the previous Congress, which means that the status of North Korean army is quite reduced. And then the institutional control would be shed light upon from two different perspectives. And the Central Committee were given the greater power because basically through the internal organization within the military, they try to give a sovereignty in the military itself so that they can have a bigger power, because the members of the Central Committee are actually military men, and the military men themselves can have a bigger power in controlling the entire North Korean army. And the last thing about the institutional control is that they just overhauled the organization of U.S. North Korean army, and the projects that were led by the army was delegated to the external parts. So some top leaders of the authorities of some leaders and power were integrated and delegated to the military organization. And it is expected that the power would be ever tightened from now on. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lee Gi-dong. After the 8th Congress, the status of the North Korean military were differentiated, and thank you for your insightful presentation.
예,
Thank you for your presentations. I'd like to make comments in the order of the presentations. First, for Professor Cho Dong-ho's presentation regarding economy, you mentioned it's their economy policy 2.0. But in fact, back in 2017, they already declared their concept or plan to pursue both nuclear program as well as economy. But afterwards, again, they haven't tried to restore such policy. And also this year, they even erased such a policy in their party role. So they must have expected certain conditions, but the conditions were different from their expectations. So under the circumstances, they had to change their plan for the economic development. So Kim Jong-un mentioned that it is all about breakthrough, especially regarding the 8th Party Congress. So external cooperation and diplomacy relations were limited because of the sanctions. So they have to put more focus on the domestic matters. As their people were let down by these external factors, they had no other option but to focus on the livelihood of the people. And also regarding the presentation done by Dr. Lee, so the outpost theory as a socialist powerhouse, and also their effort to become normal state and to be recognized in the global community. So based on these efforts, so I think this provided us a good explanation of why they tried these different or bipolarized policies so far. And I do not have any further comment to make regarding the third presentation. In the past, North Korea used to focus on military power because they didn't have any other option. After the collapse of Soviet Union and with the death of their president Kim Il-sung, so in 2016 and 3 years in a row, they had to starve because of the flood. So the party did not have the strong authority at all because they didn't have any food to distribute to the people. So military was the only tool for them to exercise. In the process, the power of the military has escalated, which brought number of side effects and undermined the livelihoods of the people. And this problem was recognized by Kim Jong-un. So the military first policy had to be transferred to more people-focused policy in the regime of Kim Jong-un. Against this backdrop, in the Eighth Party Congress, I believe Kim Jong-un tried to institutionalize such policy within the role of the party. However, he didn't forget to mention the importance of the defense, not just the nuclear program, but as a means of the development of economy, he turned his eyes to the military power. So it's not military first policy. However, he will utilize the military power in order to develop their economy further. Thank you, Professor Lee. Now, let me ask questions to respective presenters, and also I'd like to raise some questions. So if you have any other opinion to add in the middle of discussion, just simply raise your hand, then I will give you the microphone. I'd like to ask a question to you because you are sitting right beside me. Starting with Dr. Lee's comment. So in the 8th Congress, Kim Jong-un mentioned a lot about the economy, but also mentioned the military force. And on that, Professor Jo Dong-ho mentioned that it's their economy policy 2.0. But then Dr. Lee Tae-yoon said he doesn't agree with Dr. Jo's idea. So other than listing the segment where they will increase their military force, as Dr. Jo mentioned, so their pursuit of a nuclear program as well as the economy, so far their strategy were kind of clear-cut, but as you coined the term like economy policy 2.0, I'd like to listen if you have any further evidence. No, I'm afraid I don't have evidence or clue, but just context-wise, I think North Korea is moving that way. So when we have catchphrase like advanced society, that doesn't mean that we are becoming advanced society at all. As Dr. Lee mentioned, in order to move toward economy first policy, they have to make this logic. That's why the government in North Korea is saying that their nuclear program is already successful, so they have to put the focus only on economy now. So they have no other option because they cannot say they failed in nuclear program. I was saying that way. Then let me put it this way. I'd like to share the clue. So I'd like to share a clue that there was no change at all in their socialist and economy policy. So they have shared this 5-year economic development plan in order to boost their economy and the people's lives, which means that they will utilize the natural resources that used to be monopolized by the party to the public for the sake of economic development. But practically, how do you think this policy will strengthen their military power? So after the party congress this year, for almost 6 months, Kim Jong-un has highlighted the importance of economy only. Nothing other than economy was stressed by the government. And also, as Dr. Lee mentioned, on one hand, they are saying they will further develop the military power, but the reputation or the authority of the military was decreased by Kim Jong-un. So as they have to put priority on the development of economy, they wanted to show off in one hand about their success in the military area. So in that regard, so this economy policy 2.0 doesn't make sense for me. What's your take on this?
아니,
I might have made a mistake. One by one, it was a joke. I think it's the difference in perspective. Where we put the focus changes can change our opinion. And we should make sure these messages from the party congress is to the public in North Korea or to other nations. From the perspective of an economist, so at one point, all of a sudden, North Korea declared that they will, from now on, talk about economy only, but then they will all change their policy again to both nuclear program as well as economy. So regarding these changes in their policy, I'd like to say that they renewed their economic policy. However, they never changed the direction of the economy. They just updated or upgraded the economic policy, in my opinion. And
하나는 내부적으로는 경제 건설 집중 노선을 계속 가는 것이고 대외적으로는 우리가
so domestically, they have to put more focus on the economy, but on the other hand, externally, they had to signal the other nations that they are willing to have a dialogue to some extent. So I think we have different perspectives simply.
국방력 나왔으니까 이기동 박사님한테 하나 질문을 던진 다음에 나머지 두 분께서도
So let me ask questions to Dr. Lee Gi-dong, and other presenters and participants can ask questions to him as well. So you were doubtful about the stronger military because of the amount of budget has decreased, and also regarding the reputation of the military. I think it's Kim Jong-un declared the completion of nuclear program and missile and other non-conventional arms have been highlighted, but
스스로 이게 되는 걸
stronger military power doesn't necessarily mean that North Korea will increase their budget on military. What's your take?
뭐 그렇게 중요한 주장은 아니었고요. 예. 일단 발언기가 되신 것 앞에
So if I add to the discussion right before we had, so when we decide whether North Korea is having economy policy 2.0 or they are continuing the previous economic policy, I think basically the key word of the 8th Party Congress was on economic development, and the ultimate goal of the party is the revitalization of North Korean economy. So they demonstrated strong willingness toward the economic development. But then why Kim Jong-un mentioned about the military power by listing up the modernized weapons they are willing to develop? If you ask, I think as the U.S. is trying to expand their arms in South Korea, so against this backdrop, they signaled that the U.S. North Korea is ready to deal with any armed conflict going forward. In that regard, I think North Korea tried to send a message that they will have nuclear deterrence on their part. So in such context, I believe it is understandable. Back in 2016, when they conducted multiple nuclear tests, their budget on the military didn't increase significantly. So I agree with your opinion on the military budget. So military is related to the budget. However, it can have multi dimensions to take a look. So their parallel economic policy. So as you mentioned, so you are saying that they are saying they will pursue stronger military power. However, it can be translated as a fake announcement or some signal to other nations.
어쨌든
Anyway, North Korea announced their will to power from the perspective of power balancing necessity. And this is the condition that North Korea is requesting for the international community. And if they choose the goodwill to goodwill attitude, they will continue the reform and opening of the market. So with these preconditions that they suggested, they are just waiting for the answer from the United States. So that could be nuclear 2.0, or that could be the sustainable economic development. That's why it could be a two-faced attitude. Out of this regards, I would like to say that we need to focus on this point. North Korea is trying to introduce the new national security, which is quite different from conventional national security. So, given the medical infrastructure of North Korea, they cannot take the burden of corona pandemic. They decided to shut down their borders faster than other countries. It was too much drastic and fundamental and extreme, and it ruined the civil life. However, from the other perspective, it could be the realization of the new national security focused on protecting the civil lives. So we have to consider both sides. Last year, North Korea tried to take the measures of anti-disaster or disaster restoration, and that showed the changes in the concept of national security in the aftermath of flood or drought or other natural disasters. Actually, we have been worried over the conventional military-focused national security and external policies. However, they are turning more and more flexible in a sense thanks to COVID. Thank you for your remarks. In North Korea, from last year, they are talking about the disaster management or crisis management. So they are viewing the disaster management as a element asset for the national administration, which is called new national security. So according previous to the Dr. Lee's remark, Dr. Cho wanted to make his remark. I would like to add some comments. So the moderator said we need to be punctual, and actually I am watching the clock in front of us, and the numbers are marked in red, and red means alert. So I was quite nervous while delivering my remark. However, the colors changed it now into green. Thank you. I mentioned about the implementation of the advanced society, which was the slogan during the former President Chun Doo-hwan era. Slogan is good. However, there's no actual action to realize or implement the campaign. We have to check out the resource for realization. So, in this regard, North Korea made slogans of we already win over the economic development or something else like that. And behind these propaganda, we could see the will to improve the inter-Korea relations. So, under the circumstances, they talked about the front to focus on the economic development, and they thought about the methodologies to realize this slogan. And while North Korea is still highlighting the importance of advancing the economy, I feel so void because it seems to be a mere bluffing. They can tolerate, but they cannot achieve a significant growth because they lack of action plan. So that's quite a void propaganda or a void slogan. I'm so sorry about the situation. Thank you for your input. I truly understand what Dr. Cho highlights. How his remark is that they are just making propaganda of focusing on economic development. However, no mobilization of sufficient resources made in North Korea, but they don't give up this front. Then they need to overhaul. They are just trying to skip the parts that are impossible, and they are still highlighting the slogan. But still, the slogan seems to be void and a mere bluffing. So his remark highlights that there are a lot of poor conditions still lingering in North Korea, and it's really hard to achieve the slogan for achieving the advanced economy. So he seems the situation to be very deplorable. However, we cannot just rule out any potential of realizing the front in North Korea. So we have to be really careful about making diagnosis on the future of North Korean economy. So I think that's my interpretation on Dr. Jo's remark. Dr. Lee, let's get into the mainstream again, and he asked that is that a mere bluffing of the slogan of North Korean military strengthening? I feel that's possibly a piece of bluffing. It is a exceptional case that at the Congress they mentioned about the military plan or strategy, tactics, development of nuclear weapons, and others. These are the items that are not frequently disclosed from the Congress level. So, and they are quite a far-fetched dream, and it cannot be achieved in a shorter term. These this type of far-fetched dream goes on, and this is a bluffing strategy to make pressure upon the U.S. And basically, in the process of the Congress, Kim Jong-un's basic perception on the international politics were revealed. The military needs to protect the people from not only from military threats, but also from non-military threats. It highlights the role of the military on the economy too. So I think the military beef up or arms beef up plan of the North is just a bluffing. And yeah, that's drawing a lot of attention from the world on putting on an emphasis on the arms beef up plan. And now the military is also talking about the plan for developing economy, and sometimes the military is mobilized for the disaster recovery works, such as after the flood or something else like that. That means that the military can sometimes intervene in the civilians' life to make them protected. And there's another question to Dr. Lee. These days, the Sino-U.S. decoupling or the tension is heightened these days, and these type of tension, is that an opportunity or a crisis for North Korea? What's your opinion about this? I don't want to go by polarized. It's not a yes or no question. I just like to put my idea. Let's suppose that the U.S. is strong-handed and North Korea will choose to the balance of power. And in the past, they internally developed nuclear weapons and they tried to realize internal balance so that they can go against the U.S. However, these days, North Korea used the term beneficial or advantageous. It means that they are ready to mobilize the external balance. So the concept of balancing of the North has been advanced and evolved from the 1990s to now. And under the circumstances of isolation, they had to prepare for all the possible situations by themselves. However, these days, they changed their attitude toward the international politics. And these days, I'm wondering about the future of the North Korea China relations. Are they having any type of strategic communications? There has been a series of Communist Party of China's ceremonies, and regarding these events, the ambassadors of the two countries announced their articles or the reports on the series of the events to celebrate the opening of Communist Party of China. And I understand that North Korea would like to utilize the external balance they achieved. But the thing is that we are quite doubtful over the tolerance of North Korea because of the economic isolation of the North as of now. And in the time of conflict, in the time of cooperation, North Korea's response is based on balance, and they are expanding the concept of balance right now. I don't think my question was that vague, but the answer was quite different from what I expected. I'm sorry. But I did not intend any yes or no question. So let me just paraphrase my previous question. So under the circumstances of U.S.-China decoupling, will it have any influence over the North Korean policies or North Korean nuclear policies of the U.S.? Do you expect any influence of the U.S.-China relations in the U.S.-North Korea policies? The reason that I said it's difficult to answer is that we have to approach in the several scenario for the U.S.-China relations. And about a few months ago, watched the Alaska summit, and they said that's the revival of the Cold War era, and they said they saw a certain type of confrontation. However, I believe that in the given time, the two leaders of the G2 had to express their ideas about the international politics. So I don't really think the G2 relations will get into another confrontation because there is a possibility of a new cooperation system. So I think the two possibilities are still open.
So after the dialogue, they announced a statement. The first story on it was about North Korea. That means U.S. and China found a common ground regarding the North Korean issue. Still, North Korea is trying to have external balancing via China, but at the same time, North Korea is cautious of potential abandonment by China as well. I think that's why North Korea is putting so many preconditions before their dialogue, but they are willing to, at the same time, and open to dialogue. Basically, as many security experts mentioned, Korea-US alliance should be strengthened. We can leverage alliance in order to be championed by the public in Korea. From North Korea's perspective, they have to expand their alliance with China. Only then they can strengthen their leverage in the global community. One clue is that for the first time for a while, I saw the expression like alliance based on blood. This alliance based on blood means that from China's perspective, China think North Korea has something to repay to China. So from that perspective, I think this kind of notion that China considers North Korea as someone who that has still something to repay to China, this kind of notion has highlighted. So in that respect, the bilateral relationship must be in a quite close position now. As the domestic matters get serious, it is reasonable for the country to make sure they have immediate benefit, like external aid to North Korea. This aid is immediate benefit they can pursue. So they will be willing to get potential aid from China according to the strategic judgment. In other words, they have to take advantage of the leverage in the external environment, and at the same time, they have to pursue some domestic matters to take care of. I'd like to ask another simple question to Dr. Lee. Then last year, China provided aid. They provided rice to North Korea. Some rumors has that because of the rice aid pandemic happened,
덜 좀 곤란해서 안 갖고 가는 건지
So I'm not sure if there's anything played behind the scene. So I'm not sure what the intention China is having at the moment. As other presenters mentioned, we have big events in July this year. If we could resume high-level meetings, for sure, North Korea will give some package or benefits to China. So if that happens, no, I mean that so China is willing to provide additional aid to North Korea, but North Korea turned it down. I'd like to know what sentiment or what move North Korea is trying to make here. Vice President Lee, please help me here. So last year, China provided 10,000 tons of rice to North Korea, but she promised 50,000 ton in the bilateral meeting. But
비상강력 방역 체제를 강화하고 있는 상황에서 또
so because of the pandemic, they are strengthening the domestic quarantine measures, and also there has been several scandals where some government officials were sentenced to death. So I think there was some communication mistakes to my translation. As you mentioned, under such a difficult situation, why North Korea is not accepting the aid? Nonetheless, it's clear for all of us that North Korea is struggling with food shortage. As seen in the 8th Party Congress, out of 8 agenda, the food shortage was the second listed on the agenda. First one was the official report about their policy implementation, and second one was food shortage, which means that this food shortage issue is quite severe at the moment in North Korea. So regarding that, the food crisis in North Korea is well known, but we may have different idea about the level of the shortage. Now, regarding leadership in North Korea, Kim Jong-un is pretty good at preventive measures and he predict the certain situations in their society. So, I mean, one suspect is that Kim Jong-un possibly is not clarifying about the food shortage status at the moment. North Korea may be considering the past events, and until last year, North Korea was not in such dire situation, and they accumulated some food for the sake of emergency. So for the time being, they was able to survive, and I think against this backdrop, they turned the aid down from China. The reason why I asked this question should be explained, and I'd like to ask another question to you before we conclude the session. In the middle of the tense relations, U.S. and China had such tension because of severe competition. On the other hand, they cooperated on some matters. And cooperation includes North Korean issue. Regarding North Korean issue, the U.S. expects China to make sure North Korea stay within the line, but China must be requesting a kind of payback from the U.S. This is just my assumption. Another assumption could be as the decoupling gets intensified and sanctions are still on North Korea, but the U.S. is also imposing sanctions on the leadership of China as well. So for the past 20 years, the cooperation scheme between U.S. and China may be changed. So how long China will continue to follow the leadership of the U.S. on the matter of North Korean issue? So under the situation between U.S. and China, decoupling from China must be making many impacts on multiple relations. Lastly, I'd like to ask a question to Professor Jo. April last year, in Busan, North Korea installed a complex industrial complex for export increase. But with the sanctions, they failed to expand their export and economic revitalization, and also struggle with the pandemic. But in the middle of this kind of situation, they installed this kind of complex. What's the intention do you think North Korea has with this complex? I was surprised as well. I'm confident that Kim Jong-un has a good understanding of economy because infrastructure is a must for economic development. It changes the economic growth, and based on capital, we can have infrastructure. But because of sanctions, these infrastructure are not working. But still, North Korea is adding another infrastructure, so it doesn't make any sense. And these complexes are led by local governments, not the central government in North Korea. So I'm guessing that North Korea is in some extent of autonomy to local governments regarding economy in particular. That's why they approved such installation of infrastructure. It's just my guess. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. And in the interest of time, I'd like to give just 1 minute to each presenter. If you'd like to add any comment, please do so. Why don't we start with Professor Lee and move to Professor Jo? 1 minute each. Regarding the party rule,
낮은 단계의 연방제와
so they included June 15 implementation in their party rule. And also they officially mentioned, I think, the common prosperity. And finally, the agreement we made from the June 15 finally included in their party role. So slow but steadily, we are making progress, I believe. I don't like it, but I don't trust. To Professor Lee, I'd like to comment on the same topic. I think you made a point. We often forget that
그거는 이제 그 이후로 사실 북한
feather system North Korea adopted back in 2013. High-level federation system is not easy to achieve. So in the short term, we could adopt a lower level federation system like Korea federal system. And also it could be combined with the concept that South Korea is pursuing. So in that sense, we need to put more focus on this federation system. Good point. So North Korea has introduced a lower level federal system. Not that I don't like it, but this was already mentioned in the second article of the June 15 agreement. But I don't think it's meaningful to have that as a topic on the negotiating table between two countries. To Dr. Lee, I'd like to mention on the same topic as well. In the 8th Party Congress, the party role mentioned co-prosperity, which is not familiar to the people of North Korea because peace, co-prosperity, these terms are popular among South Korean public. I think this is a signal that they are willing to adopt the idea that has been presented by South Korea. To Dr. Jo, as our moderator smoothly operated this session, I was impressed. Next time, if I have an opportunity to become a moderator, I'd like to do like you. I will never become a panelist when you moderate any session. Thank you for your meaningful presentation as well as insight sharing. I wanted to challenge you with tough questions.
오늘 저녁에 이제
Because the chairman of the institute insisted me on asking tough questions to you. So sorry about tough questions today, and this concludes the session. Thank you, everyone.
해주신 자장님
Thank you, the moderator and the participants.
on the stage. 네, 저희가 정말 통일이 되면 얼굴도 지실 귀한 분들
Once the peninsula is unified, these people will be much busier.
and all the audience in this place. 마지막까지 애써주신 행사 담당
Thank you for being with us. Thank you.